Natasha,
Debbie,
show.
the show.
Welcome to it. Just two patriotic girls.
Learning about the world.
So please, don't take us the wrong way.
What's up?
Your hair. It's sexy. That's why I'm staring at you.
So glad you're here to join us today. If you like today's content, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. But only do it if you want to.
I wish I was your comb. Enough weirdness out of the way there. That's the real Natasha and Debbie show right there.
That is?
People on Patreon and Facebook? No. Anyway, yeah, we're excited with this episode today, guys, because we're going to be comparing New York City.
Over here in New York.
You
that
are.
means you are.
Oh, they don't. Versus New York City subway. Mm-hmm. You're not a subway, I'm sorry. Versus London Underground.
There you go. Well, that's London.
Yeah. Oh. I don't know what that is. That's not that. Anyway, so that's what we're doing today. And we'd love to know in the comments section, anybody here that's been on both, because we haven't been on both, obviously. So in America, obviously, we think of subway, we think of New York City.
Pretty much.
And a little confession to you, an embarrassment for me.
Do tell.
You already know what it is.
I do.
She just wants to
share
tell
with
you.
them.
So for years, I thought, because of stupid TV and movies, they always showed the same picture. It was always like the same sign of the underground, you know, with the steps going down. And I thought it was like this super cool rock club. No, really.
I believe it.
Like an exclusive rock club where like Mick Jagger would be down there playing with who knows who. That's what I thought it was. I did not know it was, you know, a subway, essentially.
It's super cool if that was there.
Yes, this is the thoughts of an American brain. You're welcome. Don't make fun of me too much. But I really did. And now I decided I want a shirt with the London Underground symbol on it.
That would be cool to wear one like that.
It'd be funny to have one with an arrow pointing down.
London Underground.
Anyway, I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what's wrong with me today. But no, so that's what we're going to take a look at today. The Underground.
Yes.
And New York City subway. So I know one thing about this. Underground's older. It's older.
Probably is.
And I don't know if the Underground is a 24-hour service, but I know New York City subway is. Maybe we'll learn that in this video. Okay. So let's take a comparison to these two, because this is interesting. I think they're probably the most popular in the world as far as, you know, notoriety and whatever.
Well, let's find out all the differences that this video has to show us.
The New York City subway and the London Underground are not just the most famous rapid transit systems in the English-speaking world, but two of the most iconic and influential transportation systems in history. From extensive networks to famous maps, their inclusion in iconic films, and essentially becoming an integral part of their respective city. So the question is only natural. In a one-on-one cage match, which system would win? But seriously, looking at the ways the different systems compare and contrast and excel and sort of fall behind is a great way of seeing how they can improve and create better
I already know who's going to win.
Who's that?
It's going to be London. He has an Underground sign behind him, for one.
Maybe. You never know.
But I also do know this. I do know New York City subways used to suck tremendously, but I know in the last decade or even longer, they have improved it a lot.
They have cleaned them up a bit.
But, and I will say this also, Underground's trains, way cooler looking.
Yeah,
so
they probably are.
They're way cooler looking. You've seen them.
I've seen a bit of them, yeah.
They're cool. So, just saying.
And sort of fall behind is a great way of seeing how they can improve.
This makes me nervous.
And create better transit that attracts more riders and makes existing ones more happy. So let's get into it. The New York City subway versus the London Underground.
Which even
I hope
sounds
you're
cool.
excited for the return of the Transport Battle series with this updated episode on the London Underground versus the New York City subway. In this video, we'll be exclusively comparing the subway to the Underground. So as much as I'd like to bring in the PATH or the DLR, we won't be doing it, at least in this video. Let's start where any trip on rapid transit starts, at the stations.
Good call.
The quality of a transit station depends on a ton of different factors. Both New York City and London have stations which are very iconic. New York with its domes at the entrances and wrought iron, and London with iconic old buildings and roundels all over the place. At platform level, the tube station design is probably more famous, but New York stations with their exposed steel columns are probably even more universal to the system. Now, accessibility is a huge problem for both of these systems. New York has a greater number of accessible stations, but a lower proportion of its overall stations are accessible. On the other hand, some stations in London have truly atrocious non-level boarding, which owes to the fact that the subsurface and deep-level underground lines have trains with different floor heights, despite interlining and sometimes using the same platforms.
Oh, really?
Cleanliness is another story.
Oh, crap.
And while both systems have stations that run the gamut from really gross to quite nice, I would say that the average New York station feels darker and less clean than the average London station. I think overall this is helped by the general aesthetic of London stations, which tend to feature a lot more tile that's just probably easier to keep clean than all of the complex steel that you see in New York stations.
And again, they're prettier. Look at that. They're red, white, and blue.
Yeah. They seem more domed at the top.
Yeah.
And then...
I feel like they're much, much more narrow, though. Maybe I'm wrong?
yeah, I don't know.
Just seems
Can't
that
tell
way.
on that.
The platform might be a little bit. Yeah, I'm not shocked on this one. I'm not gonna pretend like I'm surprised.
I also didn't experience rats to anywhere near the same extent when riding on the underground recently compared to the New York City subway. Now, all of that being said, I do want to give kudos to New York for its enhanced station initiative, which really does make enhanced stations feel super nice. The only issue I see with it is that it doesn't apply nearly broadly enough, so you might have a really nice station in one place and kind of a dingy one in others.
Yep.
True.
It's also really good that both systems now allow you to pay contactless with credit and debit and have their own contactless
that looks
smart
nice and
cards,
clean.
which is something that wasn't true just 5 years ago.
Yeah.
That being said, when you're tapping your card, New York loses out because turnstiles, in my personal opinion, are just worse than fare gates. You never walk into a fare gate and feel like you might need to head to the hospital because you've done some damage to your body.
No, that's nitpicky, dude. Come on, man. It's a turnstile. What are you doing with that thing?
It is a turnstile.
They
but
don't hurt.
it showed the London one with the
That's fine, but I don't.
ones.
That's
They just
great.
open up.
That's great, though. But it is not a problem. I mean,
I
it's
think it depends on your height.
I think this is nitpicking. Your height.
I mean, those bars hit you in
in
different
the head.
areas.
If they hit you in the forehead,
They
Debbie.
could hit you right here if you're that tall. Like,
No, I think
eh.
this one's that's a nitpicky thing right there. If it was reversed, you guys would agree with me. I just don't think that's worth mentioning. Personal opinion.
Which is the case with turnstiles sometimes.
Not really.
Overall, both systems have a lot of work to do, and both systems have their great iconic elements, but overall, London is just in a better place with the state of its stations. So it wins this round.
Oh, shocking.
Now, when you go to a station, you go there to get on a train. So how do London and New York's trains actually stack up? Like a lot of rapid transit systems, both New York and London have two main classes of trains, one larger and one smaller.
Knew that.
Want to look at this?
Jubilee line.
So a little bit wider, it looks like. Okay.
In London, it feels like the smaller tube trains make up about 60% of the network, while in New York, the ratio feels roughly reversed. When you actually look at the larger train stock, I would say it's a slight win for London. The S stock is more attractive and fully walk-through. That being said, given London's famous for its good wayfinding, something I did notice when actually riding on the S-Stock trains versus the larger trains in New York is that I think New York just simply wins on wayfinding. On the S-Stock, you get an LED signboard that tells you the next station, but in New York, on many...
Is that a bird? I think I saw a pigeon. No, seriously. Did you see a pigeon?
On the S...
Ah.
But in New York, on many trains, you get the large...
You thought I was making that up.
So
There were two pigeons.
pigeons right
Did
the
they
underground.
pay? Did they use their Oyster card?
I would freak out being stuck on there with a bird. No.
I'm sorry. I took away from the whole point he's making here. Apologies. Apologies. I just did not expect to see two pigeons walking in there.
larger trains in New York is that I think New York just simply wins on wayfinding. On the S-Stock, you get an LED signboard that tells you the next station, but in New York, on many trains, you get the large LED boards that show you the next several stops and a lot of the stops towards the end of the line.
That'd be helpful
as well
for
as
me.
the convenient
Very
connections
helpful.
you can make at each one, which is just super useful.
Okay, I agreed.
Even though this isn't something super new, I think this is a really underappreciated feature of New York's trains. At the same time, the most recently updated New York City rolling stock has far more screens than London's rolling stock, which makes for more interesting advertising and potentially better wayfinding. The tube stock is all very constrained by the tight tunnels it has to operate within, and that ultimately just creates a lot of issues. The headroom is lacking, the trains are very narrow, and the space is incredibly constrained within them, which isn't great for...
Can I just say, though, that the seats are grossing me out? I'm sorry, because if you put those in New York City subway, you don't put cushions. No, you wouldn't do that, because ew. Ugh. Like, I'm a germaphobe if you don't know that already, and that would gross me out, because that's not an easy thing to clean. Now, again, you might be a lot cleaner. May not have that problem. You're not going to find cushions.
No,
Nope.
not in New York.
No.
The trains are very narrow, and the space is incredibly constrained within them, which isn't great for accessibility. I also think to a kind of crazy extent that the newest deep-level tube stock feels incredibly similar to the oldest deep-level tube stock that's still in service. And that's not great, because you'd expect that over roughly 40 years there would be more significant improvement. Now yes, that is a testament to the difficulty of designing a train that can fit within those deep-level tubes, but more improvement, again, would be good.
Like what, though?
At the same time, unlike New York's smaller rolling stock, which basically just feels like a smaller version of the larger trains, the tube trains don't have air conditioning, which can be really rough on a hot London day. Ultimately, I think for the smaller rolling stock, New York gets a big win. Now, seating on the trains is obviously important, and I think both systems get some elements right. I appreciate that London's trains have seats with significant padding, especially on the older trains, something which basically none of New York's trains have. That being said, though, the plastic seats used in New York mean they're a lot easier to keep clean, and if they're a bit messy, you can wipe them clean easily with a napkin.
What did I say?
You were saying that.
Again, I don't know how clean people are on the underground. I'm sure clean. And I'm not saying all New Yorkers are dirty. They're not. I have a lot of friends in New York, and they're good, clean people.
That's true.
But again, it's just easier to, I mean, you can, like you said, you can get a little paper towel or napkin and clean it yourself if you have to. I would prefer this. I just don't like cushions anywhere. My butt appreciates a cushion, but, sorry. I don't want to sit on something that could potentially be gross and not know necessarily until I have.
Well, it seems like you could sanitize better.
And how often do they clean the cushion seats, and what do they clean them with? I'm just curious. Sorry. You'll be thinking I'm nitpicking now.
I mean, they're a lot easier to keep clean, and if they're a bit messy, you can wipe them clean easily with a napkin. Now, you might mention that London is getting new tube trains, the New Tube for London program with Siemens. But at the same time, New York is also getting new, fully walk-through subway trains, and so that's kind of a wash. And so I think ultimately in the trains category, New York wins, even if I think the trains are less cool looking.
They are less cool looking.
Trains are great, but if you're left waiting on a platform for a long time, that isn't great. And generally, I think London has better system-wide service, which probably owes to the fact that New York is just far more heavily interlined throughout its subway network. Yes, London does have interlining, but just a less substantial part of the network. London also has, on the whole, more modern and better signaling, which not only allows for super high frequency trains that are also semi-automated, which yes, do exist in New York, but in less locations, but also higher reliability and less delays, which again is super important when you have a lot of interlining.
Well, that's important.
And the most heavily interlined portion of the London Underground network, the subsurface lines, is being slowly, and in a delayed fashion, upgraded entirely to communications-based train control. Of course, New York does have a couple of very powerful tricks up its sleeve. Express service is available in both cities, but it just exists far more broadly in New York. And all of that extra track that enables express services means that New York has very comprehensive 24-hour service every single day of the week. London does now have 24-hour service, but it's only on Friday and Saturday nights. And while I think that's probably mostly good enough for most people, week-long is just super powerful. And really, short of Copenhagen, which I talked about in a recent video, just not that many subway systems have 24-hour service every day of the week, and that's something special.
Really? I just thought everyone did. I mean, I know I said at the beginning of the video, I didn't. I knew New York did. I actually kind of thought London did too. And
I thought all major cities with subways would have 24-hour service.
Yeah, because in New York, it's not just like you're going out on the weekends. You're using the subway, most people are, to get anywhere, to go out, to eat, any place.
To and from work. Yep.
Yeah.
Especially city to city or even city to suburb.
Yeah. That's crazy. So surprise there. Learned something. I've learned a lot of things, but okay, interesting.
With that kept in mind, I think this round comes out as a tie. Now with service comes connectivity. And both systems can get you pretty much anywhere you want to go in their respective cities. Though New York, with over 100 more stations, does just get you to more places. And that being said, there are still major deficiencies in both systems. South of the Thames in London is just not that well covered by the tube. And west of the Hudson in New York isn't covered by the subway at all. And yes, it's a different state, but it's still part of the New York metropolitan region. And the fact that there isn't a unified transport agency like TfL in the New York region is a big problem. Well, London's fares are more expensive than New York.
Oh, really?
And the citywide flat fare of New York does feel incredibly powerful. The fact that you can get on any rail transport on the zonal system in London is really useful. And that's helped by the fact that outside of the tube and the subway, London does have more mainline and other types of rail networks, whereas New York does have a few...
Hold on, but can't you still use the same Oyster card for the outside of the main lines? I would assume you can.
I thought that's what we learned.
I don't know if we learned that. I just feel like you could. I don't know. I don't remember that part, but can you? So if you can, then I feel like that's all like...
More
still connected in a way.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Have more mainline and other types of rail networks, whereas New York does have a few major commuter railways and the Hudson Bergen Light Rail and the Path, but just not as much as London.
Okay.
Now this integration is something you also see with cross-platform transfers. Both systems do have a large number of them, but London has more to other services outside of the tube network than New York has to services
I'm not
outside
surprised
of
by
the
that at all.
subway network. So on this round of connectivity, it goes to London. The next category is expansion, and on expansion, I don't think either system is doing nearly enough, especially given the deficiencies I mentioned in the previous category. And part of the reason for this is because prices for new projects in both cities have gone through the stratosphere. That being said, given that the Elizabeth line is not a tube line, only New York is building a brand new subway line through the center of the city, even if it is moving incredibly slowly. 2nd Avenue Subway Phase 2 will probably be done in a decade and a half or so, and London just doesn't have any tube projects moving forward right now. And so New York just barely wins in this category.
But hold on, I mean, do you like have a lot of room for that, really, though?
I don't think London has the room for all that expansion.
Moving forward right now. And so New York just barely wins in this category. The last category is the wild card category. It's always hard to categorize every single element of a rapid transit system, and so I like to have this final category to give attention to some of the lesser appreciated elements of both of the systems that wouldn't fit in the other categories. Broadly speaking, I feel like London's system felt more modern about 10 years ago, especially since it features platform screen doors even if only at a few stations. In recent years, though, New York's incorporation of really good digital wayfinding and
New York just wants you to fall down. That was way cool. That's way safer.
Yeah.
That safety means a lot.
It
like,
does.
why don't we have that?
He said it wasn't in every platform, but a lot of them were.
I don't think we have it in any platforms.
Not that I know of.
I've never seen that.
But that's kind of smart to do that.
Yeah, I've never heard of it. So that's really kind of cool.
stations. In recent years, though, New York's incorporation of really good digital wayfinding and digital screens on trains just makes it feel very futuristic. Speaking of wayfinding, both systems do have iconic and great wayfinding systems, and I'm personally a big fan of New York's semi-geographically accurate subway/city map. That being said, across the system, London's wayfinding just feels like it's higher quality and in better shape. And I also feel like it's generally more helpful. London has also done a better job, in my personal opinion, of incorporating heritage elements of the system into the modern system, whether that be old platform finishings or old head houses for stations. It all makes it feel a bit like the cliche of a museum that you can actually physically use. Now, while a large portion of the tube network goes through very low-density suburban areas and even rural areas in some cases, New York subway just takes you to more interesting destinations with all of its elevated lines in the outer boroughs, which make for fantastic vistas and pictures of the city and the subway system itself.
Fair.
London just doesn't have nearly as much elevated track on its system. That being said, the tube can actually take you to Heathrow, something which the New York City subway frustratingly doesn't do for any of the New York area airports.
That's so true.
You need to take a silly airport shuttle train for the last mile to JFK or a bus to LaGuardia. And that might be fixed in the future, but for now, Heathrow's connection is just better.
Yeah.
One thing I can't say I miss about London, though, is the incredibly, painfully loud sound in the deep level tubes.
Oh, really?
Now, it's not universally bad, but in particular on the Jubilee Line extension, one of the newest portions of the network, it is just ear-crushingly loud and shrill and just an incredibly unpleasant experience. Now, New York's trains are not perfectly silent, but there's nothing I've experienced in New York quite as painful as on the Jubilee Line extension.
Must be pretty bad then. Or is it? Let us know.
Northern Line. Now, with all of that said, one of the biggest problems that large metro systems face is that getting across them can be incredibly time-consuming. Now, to be fair, the Elizabeth Line does solve this problem to some extent, but it's not part of the tube, and it is really only just one line. New York City's subway's express services are not just powerful because they're express services, but because they add an entire new layer onto almost the entire network since they're so broadly available. And it's really not just to make getting from one suburb to another or from the suburb to the city center easier, but getting through the densest parts of New York is incredibly fast in a lot of different directions thanks to the express trains. For example, going from Lower Manhattan to Midtown is very fast if you catch an express, whereas in London you don't have that many options to go through the center at high speeds unless you're talking about the Elizabeth Line. And so the express services in New York are very, very powerful and still probably underappreciated and a feature that no other metro system implements to the same extent as New York.
That is pretty important if you need to get across town.
Well, absolutely. I'm just surprised that London doesn't offer the same. That really surprises me.
At the same time, the Elizabeth Line is kind of heralded for having these giant stations with giant trains. But they're really not all that much bigger than the larger trains in the New York City subway, which just sort of goes to show you how the express services and the large stations throughout Manhattan and the rest of the city are really underappreciated. It's also worth mentioning that London has a lot more deep underground stations than New York, which are just less convenient to access, even with lots of escalators. Despite all of that though, I think the general better condition of London's system and the fact that it gets you to more of the critical places that you need to go without having to switch to other systems means that it just barely edges New York out in the wildcard category. And so with that, we have it, London wins, but just barely, and probably less so than 5 years ago. While New York has been doing a pretty good job at aggressively fixing its main problems, London seems to be stubborn on some of them. To be completely fair, London would probably win handily if we were to include the entire TfL network, which features the Elizabeth Line, the Overground, which is super useful for suburb-to-suburb circumferential trips.
The Overground? Hold on, I never heard of that before. What is this thing? Why have I never heard of the Overground?
I don't know, we have not heard about the Overground.
Have you heard of it?
No, we have the Underground, but not the Overground.
And it even says Overground. What? And it's orange. Why is it orange? Because it's Overground. I didn't know that even existed. There's an Overground? Okay, well, yeah, well, I need to learn.
Overground, which is super useful for suburb-to-suburb circumferential trips, as well as the trams, the DLR, and even more. At the same time, London does a way better job of using what it has, whether that be better signaling that allows more trains on the older lines, to keeping its stations in a better state of repair. What I will say though is that London needs to do a better job of continuing to incrementally improve its system. The older S-Stock trains are a great example of this. I don't see a good reason they couldn't be retrofitted with more modern wayfinding, which London knows how to do on modern trains like the new Overground or Elizabeth Line ones. A great example of this sort of leap forward and then stagnation is with the platform screen doors on the Jubilee Line. They're pretty good in my personal opinion, but they haven't been rolled out to other parts of the tube, even as more and more get CBTC. Now, pivoting to New York, I have to say that if New York were to get to the level of optimization and care for its old stations and infrastructure that London has, it would handily win. The network is bigger and it has built-in express services that London just can't compete with. New York also just has the benefit of having gigantic trains, especially on the lines with larger trains that are probably bigger than mainline British trains, which is an incredible asset that New York needs to better use, probably by making seating and the like more comfortable in its trains, but also getting those open gangway trains, the R211Ts, out into service. Ultimately, talking about both systems, they still best some of the newer, more modern metro systems out there, both by being more extensive and more refined, something which their great age does benefit them in. If both systems continue to optimize and upgrade, the potential is really impressive.
Agreed.
So, thanks for watching today's video, and I'll see you in the next one.
Well, that was incredibly informative and fascinating, I thought.
That was.
Want to know what you think. I think he was very fair, actually.
I think he was.
I don't know much. I don't know a lot about either. Let's be honest. I mean, we only watched one other video on the underground. That was how to ride the tube.
Yes.
Which I thought was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And we know very little about the underground. I mean, come on, I thought it was a freaking rock club.
And unfortunately, our city doesn't have a subway. So
Well, that's not entirely true.
we were supposed to.
We have an
We have
unfinished
tunnels.
one underground. But either way, my point being is that it seemed like he was being very fair, I felt, though, and I would assumed that London was going to win.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I did.
Yeah.
I know New York City is vast. It's huge. I think that also kind of hurts it, though.
It does, but then also having those, express routes and everything, trains that that is important.
That's needed and
I was
necessary.
surprised to see that London doesn't have those express routes.
Right.
Obviously, the problem comes into having enough money to improve and expand and not overcharge.
Couldn't agree more.
You know, both cities, I'm sure, struggle with keeping up with everything like
Well, yeah.
anybody else does.
Yeah. I actually surprised to know that it was more expensive in London
Mm-hmm.
than New York City. I just thought for sure New York City would be more expensive.
Yeah, I would have thought so too.
But yeah, it's a little dilapidated in the NYC.
There's definitely parts.
But they have it's come a long way though since
Mm-hmm.
before it was so much worse. Let us know what you thought, please, in the comments. Let us know if you agreed with him.
Uh-huh.
And if you didn't, that's fine. Let us know if you didn't. I think he was fair.
I think he was.
It was very informative. I learned a lot more here than I expected. And it was really interesting, I thought. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please hit the like button. Consider subscribing to the channel. We really appreciate you as always. And we'll see you on the next episode. Until then, please love like jazz.
Be as strong as Tyson.
Bye, guys.
Bye.